meeting the 24th of August, 2021. And as always, we have homework that makes you think a little bit. And so with that, I'm going to turn the information and introduction over to Wendy, who will start us out. So Wendy, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Mr. Mayor. Thank you everybody for doing your hours and hours of homework. Counselor Geary, Counselor Chenoweth.
You can thank me after you hear my answers.
I'll be grading you.
You better not be.
I'm going to go ahead and share screen because I'm excited to hear what you guys came up with. Okay, let me make this bigger. Let me know, can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Okay, so as everybody is aware, we're going to do our opening exercise is the result of all of that homework that Counselor Geary and Counselor Minke were talking about earlier. So who wants to start us out? So what you're sharing, you don't have to share all of what you discovered. You're going to share the top 5 leadership attributes that you narrowed it down to. So who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Sure. Go ahead, Kelly.
Okay, let's get this puppy over with. My 3 people were Nancy Pelosi, John McCain, and Hillary Clinton. I thought that was enough diversity. My 5 top ones were, first, all 3 of them were kind of major legislative litigators. They produced a lot of bills. They are willing to take risks, and they have a lot of ideas. They have a great deal of flexibility. They accept change that's necessary. They have a lot of focus and persistence. Great communication skills on all of them. And loyalty. Others would trust them. They believed in their integrity.
Skill and loyalty. Awesome. Can you repeat the last one? I didn't type fast enough.
Oh, loyalty. Other people trust in their integrity.
Okay. Loyalty and integrity. The last.
Oh, I'm sorry. The last one was Hillary Clinton on the names.
Okay, great. Great. Okay, who would like to go next? Okay.
I'll jump in, Wendy. The 5 traits that I came up with were compassion, intelligence, fair-minded, service-oriented, and clear vision.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Councilor Peralta.
I'll go next, Wendy.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
I struggled a little bit because I came up with 6, but it was a theme that ran through the 3 individuals that I was looking at. First was integrity/honesty. Number 2 was great communicator and a listener. Number 3 is being principled is a priority. Number 4, diligent/hardworking. Number 5, having a spiritual nature or understanding there's a higher power. And number 6 was accepting of all people, giving charity and love to those that they come in contact with.
Great.
Could you tell us who the 3 people you looked at?
I'll do that. I went somewhat close at home. The first one was my father. He's the one that taught me so much about leadership. Second is author Stephen R. Covey, who really developed the principles of leadership that are used by so many. And then I took something really off the quite different, and I'll tell you, I just looked at Jesus Christ as someone that I've done a lot of studying, and took a look at his attributes, and so those are the three I used.
That's great.
And Styles?
Yeah, sorry, my dad, Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King.
Great. Okay, who wants to go next?
I'll go.
Thank you, Zach.
And I actually have the same, on my list of three, I have the same person as Scott and Sal, my dad. I also had Henry Clay, and I also have another one of Sal's in RFK. And then the six that I came up with to to be my five are character, courage, humility, empathy, stewardship, and then I added unpopular.
Great.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Zach. Okay, who else? Let me see if I see. Oh, Counselor Chenoweth, do you want to go next?
Sure. I need to first say a hearty. I did not do as much on my homework as I have done in the past. This last week and a half has been my time has been taken away from me. So I won't dwell on that, but just to say that I apologize that I did not do as much homework as I normally would do on projects like these. So the three people that I chose, one is one of the ones Mayor Hill used. I also chose Jesus Christ. I chose, I guess you would call him my spiritual father, in the man that originally helped me to kind of get my feet underneath me as a young person. And that's a man by the name of William Davies. Some of you may know who he is, some of you do not. He's a local man. And then I also chose my father.
Great.
And I was also torn. It's hard to come up with just 5 qualities that I think are important in leadership. Compassion and empathy. I think they are 2 different ones, so I guess you'd want to call them 2 different ones. Compassion, empathy. Somebody who's in touch with their spiritual nature, I think it's important. I agree with Scott Hill on that, and surprised that I wasn't the only one that came up with that. Effective communicator. And having solid integrity. And then the close 6th for me was decisiveness.
Great. Thank you, Counselor Chenoweth. Do we have Remy on the call? I wonder. Let me see. I don't see her.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, there you are. Would you like to go next?
Absolutely. So I very intentionally chose 3 women of color to highlight this evening. So the first is Simone Biles. The second is, I chose people that are currently living and currently in leadership roles, and that was also really intentional, just because I think history casts these different lights on people, and we can choose the parts that we see. And so I wanted to choose people that are active right now, and then I'll identify some specific leadership qualities, whether or not the person as a whole is kind of something that everybody might be able to identify with. So Simone Biles, Malala Yousafzai, who I'm sorry, I didn't pronounce her last name correctly. And then I struggled a little bit on the last one because
Council President.
Remy's at the coast, so she doesn't have probably as good a control over her internet connection as she normally would, as is Kelly. Both of them are out of town.
I wonder if we should. Oh, okay. I don't even see her on here.
Yeah, she doesn't have her camera on, which will hopefully.
Okay, help.
Yeah, she may have dropped off and just trying to get back on. I don't see her now.
Okay, so let's go on. We can come back to Remy when she joins us again to get the rest of her 5. One of the reasons for the exercise, as you guys probably gathered, it is you start to see strings of what you are drawn to in leaders, and it helps you to learn about yourself as a leader. And one of the things to keep in mind with regards to this particular opportunity to provide leadership is understanding the kind of leaders that we have in this group enables us to align around our leadership, which is really where the power is for this group, to become a group of leaders that is synchronized and aligned. You do not have to be the same. In fact, the best teams, the best leadership teams are the ones that have diversity on the team, but have alignment among its members. So that's what we're working on today. So it's really good for you guys, even though it was a struggle. Thank you so much for doing the exercise. The juice is worth the squeeze for everybody to understand what drives you as a leader, so that we can start to work on making sure that we're getting from each of our members in alignment. We're able to draw the best out of each other. So thank you so much for doing that work. The next part is we really don't have that many action items. We're still in process on the Vision Traction Organizer. You guys will learn more about what that's about. We're putting the pieces together on that. And you guys will see that in a future council, or no other action items other than that one. And then the meat of this meeting is going to be around, oh, there's Remy. Hello, Remy. Good, she'll be joining us. So the meat of this meeting is going to be around the issue that was identified in our May IDS session, which was...
So Wendy, Remy's now connected if we want to finish her comments, and then we can...
You bet. Remy, are you with us?
I am. I'm sorry. I'm literally next to my hotspot, so I'm going to keep my video off, and hopefully my connection will be there. So I was saying that I was kind of vacillating between the last two, which were Greta Thunberg, who's been, is not a woman of color, but is a young woman leader, an environmental leader the world over, and is leading a youth movement. And then the characteristics that I came up with for all of these women, and I think it cut off before I said on the last one, when I was talking about Tsai Ing-wen, I was saying that she had successfully kept Taiwan, the Taiwanese people of having only 7 COVID deaths out of 23 million, and I found that admirable. And I recognize that that could be that there's a lot of emotion around Taiwan, and so I wanted to be very specific in that leadership quality. But the things that I found, the vein that I saw that ran through all of these leaders was one, that they value education. 2, that they value independent thinking, that they are courageous, that they are community-minded, and that they all have a strong moral compass, which I would actually equate with being in touch with the spiritual nature, which both the mayor and Councillor Chenoweth described. I think a lot of us are able to equate morality with being in touch with our spiritual selves. So those are mine. Thanks.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Council President Bobkin. And so as I just mentioned when you were gone, that one of the, and I appreciate how much time Zach and Kelly were talking about how much time it took to do the exercise. One of the things that the benefits of doing all that work is not just discovering about yourself, what type of leader, what drives you in your leadership, because what you see reflected in others that you highly value reflects where you find alignment with other leaders, but to learn about each other and your leadership styles, to be able to create alignment across this leadership body is one of the things that the benefits of hearing from each other about the results of the exercise. So the next part is we're down to the IDS session, and we remind you guys, and I know you had homework around this, so I'm excited to hear what you guys came up with in your homework prepared you for this session. We, in the May meeting, we came up with 2 IDSs that we were going to carry forward in future meetings. This is the second. We've already done the first one, and it produced some neat results for us. So the second one, and I included both the core statement that we came up with along with some supporting comments that I captured in that meeting under the identify part. We will have more conversation under identify to make sure we have the root issue. But what we captured in the May meeting was establishing an agreed upon process that identifies how to bring up issues that a counselor feels needs to be solved within the community or with the city council. So the first step is to make sure we understand the 5 why exercise. Helps you to go deeper into this and make sure that we're solving for what the real problem is. Why is this a problem, right? So who would like to, I will read some of the comments that were made in the May meeting around this issue. Scott had mentioned that it's a problem. It's been a problem for a while that counselors don't know how to get the things that the counselor is concerned about from the council to have a good conversation and learning experience from. And clarifying and communicating the process clearly was identified as maybe a weakness, and include in the conversation or in the issue solving, advocating for constituents that are bringing issues to you. So not just issues the counselor is concerned about, but how does a counselor represent constituent issues? And then how to advocate for people to participate without diminishing the team, include this in the process issues. So let's hear some of the results of your why exercise that was intended to help us to create clarity around this issue. Make sure that we get the meat of what we're talking about today. Who wants to start us out?
I'll go ahead and get started. I went through the asking what the problem is. I wasn't able to go 5 times, but I did 3 times. And then I summarized that And I have a tendency, Wendy and I have talked, I have a tendency sometimes not to do so much in the identifying, but coming up with the problem solving. So this is what I came up with as the real question from my perspective is, how do we bring policy and procedure, citizens' concerns, and our personal passions / agenda items to the full council for discussion? Do we only follow the annual goals and their direction?
Okay.
And so that's kind of what I came up with.
Okay. Great. Awesome. So other people have thoughts from their exercise or responses to what they've seen so far with regards to what they think the issue is that needs to be solved here? Let's see if I can see. We think we have it with this original one, and maybe it sounds like with Scott's, he thinks that maybe a missing policy procedure doesn't enable for us to bring up concerns in balance with the annual goals that we set, or the kind of bigger picture directions that we're setting for ourselves. Do we think that captures it?
Wendy, it might be nice to even ask if that's still a concern, because this is kind of a holdover from a number of months ago. We've been doing some good work. Is it a concern with the council, or is it something that we have made some headway on?
Perfect.
I would just say for my part that I feel like we've made a lot of headway in terms of addressing the concerns that I had, a lot of them related to the ability to timely engage with different parts of the budget, and in general, maybe a lack of clarity about how certain things get on the agenda if it was outside of the annual policy goals, but nevertheless a pressing issue. So I think the mayor did a good job of articulating some of that, and I think in general the situation has improved. I'd be interested in hearing from some of the other counselors on that, though.
And that's great, Sal. Thank you for sharing that. In that way, what we could do is talk about what has improved it, and then talk about if there's any next steps to make sure that we capture that and institutionalize it, right? So it sounds like good things are happening. Let's be conscious of what those things are. Go ahead, Councillor Menke. Councillor Menke, can you turn on your mic?
I wanted to comment that I think there's been a remarkable improvement in civility, and I think these talks have done a great deal towards improving that. I think it's been very good. And even though there are people here on the council, we all feel differently about different things, civility does seem to reign most of the time now.
Okay, great.
Wendy, Chris has his hand up next.
Okay, Councillor Chenoweth.
Sorry, I'm trying to do most of this through my pad, and I'm not used to using my finger to touch things, so I'm trying to grab my mouse, and that's totally ineffective right now. Anyways, so I guess, you know, I'll be the odd man out. I seem to be pretty good at that. I still am not really clear. I do think, let me say this first. I do think civility is improving, and that's a good thing. I'm still not really clear how to get things on the agenda, how things actually move forward. I don't feel like, if there's a procedure, I'm unaware of it. I am at this point using, for lack of a better way to put it, a rifle shot approach to topics, and just sending emails to whomever I think might actually do something to help get something on the agenda or get something accomplished. And I don't know if that's supposed to be the procedure, but that's what I've default fallen into because I have not been shown any other.
Go ahead.
So, and I don't know, I know we talked about, when we first brought this up, there was a talk of one of the weaknesses is an onboarding or lack of an onboarding procedure for incoming city councilors. And I would say that, that was an accurate assessment of a problem. I don't know all of the particulars why, if I'm the cause, I'm certainly willing to take responsibility if I am for why I haven't gotten that kind of training. But, it is where it is.
So I'm curious to see, somebody want to take a stab at what they think because there is an is process that may be different for every counselor that has, like Chris was just saying, he's made up his own is process for what that looks like. Do we want to take it to somebody that thinks that there is a clear process that this has been solved? Want to take a stab at what that looks like for them? And we can talk about maybe there is not a clear process that's shared across, it's been agreed to and shared across the city council that's effective, and it just needs to be, agreed to and then institutionalized across the council. So when something comes up, so Chris, do you have an example of something that we can talk about? When something comes up, what's the pathway for that to get before the council and be talked about and solved in a way that doesn't take us off track from the bigger picture goals, which is what I heard from Scott, is that we have, the things we decided to do for this year, and then we have other things that come in. When that happens, those other things that come in need to be evaluated by the body to determine what they do with it. How do you bring that up, and how do you talk about it? How do you decide if you spend energy on it or not, right?
I have no idea what the process is to get it before the council.
Right.
I don't even try to do that because if there is a process, I'm completely blissfully unaware of what that process may be. Like I said, I'm glad you appreciated that, Councilor Menke.
I thought it was so. I see.
Oh, wait. Councilor Menke? Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't know you could hear me laughing. I really apologize. I can really empathize. I think every counselor that comes on board, there's just a phase-in period where you just don't really know much of anything. And hopefully, I don't know. I mean, if you've gone and met all the department heads and talked with them, and you've had opportunities, obviously, to talk to the council, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but it's just kind of a feeling of uncomfortableness that probably lasts at least a year, maybe a little longer. So I don't think I really felt comfortable until I'd been a counselor for 3 years.
So, Councilor Menke, can you, if it's something that you learn, it sounds like you feel like you learned something, a process, but it was organic, it wasn't overtly taught to you. Oh wait, Councilor Chenoweth, go ahead and respond to that. It was to you.
Well, just before you do that, and I don't want to stop you, but I just want to say I didn't hear you. I saw you laugh. You're one of the few. You're one of the few on my screen, and I could see that you were really getting a tickle out of that. So I just want to be clear that no, nobody heard you. It was.
Well, I was really laughing in empathy, truly.
I can tell.
I know it's very confusing.
Well, it's not just confusing. I honestly don't understand like I said, if there's a process to get something before the council that's important to me, it's never been articulated to me. And
I think in the past, I mean, I always interpret it, and I don't know, I'm not absolutely certain this continues today, but I know within the last few years, it was a regular thing for the mayor to ask, are there any items, either at the beginning, after the initial stuff was done, or at the end of the meeting? And usually you wouldn't expect to actually get that, a hearing that night, but it would maybe be something that would be put on for later or something like that, or at least taken under advisement to bring up at a later time.
Yeah,
and
we don't have
that's
that.
the only thing I can think of. I mean, unless you go to the mayor and say, hey, I really want to understand this better. Or can we talk about it?
We don't have that. We haven't had that. In fact, one of the discussion points we had was not bringing stuff that's not on the agenda up in the middle of a meeting. So
I appreciate that, because I don't think that actually has been something that's been brought up for a while. It was fairly regular until maybe the last year.
So that cuffs me, right? You know, if
hey, you're good.
if I'm going to bring something up, I've got to try to track somebody down, I guess, behind the scenes. I mean, I don't know where is the appropriate point to do that. And I feel like, you know, if I've got something that's important, it's important that we all have discussions on this. You know, one of my, I don't want to get sidetracked. We'll stop there.
No, I don't think it's bad. I think you're going in the right direction.
I do too.
One of my ongoing frustrations is that we don't talk, right? We have a vote item. I don't know what that item, just pick an item. It doesn't matter what it is. And most of the counselors have pretty much formulated their opinion before they stepped in, because they did their homework and they've kind of come to where they think is the right place to be. And so there's not much talk. It's just, let's get to the vote. And
I would have.
Now wait.
I kind of offer the.
Zach doesn't
I would
go
object
that
to that. I would object to that. I do all my homework and yeah, no, I object to that.
Well, I don't agree with that either. I make a lot of votes. I make a lot of decisions at the time of the vote.
We all spend a ton of time reading in advance and come prepared, but I don't come knowing which way I'm going to go one way or the other.
Fair enough. I'll take that portion of the statement back, but I won't.
I guess I would say, Chris, I agree with you. I do think that there's probably not a clear process, but I mean, we know that the agenda is, you know, set by the mayor and the city manager. So I feel like, you know, letting them know that something's an issue and you'd like it to come forward would be one, you know, suggestion. And I guess I would say that when I said that my concerns had largely been addressed, I guess I would just say that to the extent that they have been, it's basically been that we, you know, have conversations here on the dais and, you know, bring things up and discuss them, and then staff is generally coming back with their work product based on that policy direction. And I guess I'd say that initially, you know, I wasn't sure that all of that stuff was coming back, you know, the way that I was expecting it to. But over time, I'm finding, and particularly in the last year, that things are coming back and moving apace more than I had anticipated, more than I'd expected. So it's not really that I've seen specific things that I've asked to get on the agenda, put on the agenda, but that things that I'd been expecting to see have come on. So I do agree with you that there's probably not a formal process, but I also think that, you know, informally, you know, there's a limited number of players to interact with. So I do think that just letting Jeff know and the mayor know is probably the place to start.
Let me jump in just for a moment. I'd agree with Chris that there isn't a formalized approach to get things on the items on the agenda. I'll tell you that as I look back over the last 2 years, with us not even being able to come up with a true direction from a goaling standpoint has been something that I think has gotten in the way of the effectiveness of the council. But recently, with us coming to an understanding of the goaling and where we're going, I think now that's opening things up tremendously more from a standpoint of planning and directionally where we're going. I'd like to give a great what Sal was talking about. It's a process that we typically go through. And I'd like to take an example of Cahoots is something that we talked a little bit about. And then we got to a point where we said, let's do a work session. And work sessions to me are the place where we can have some learnings and understandings. And that really gets us maybe more formalized in having it really on the agenda and seeing where it fits and fits within the goals and the capacity of staff.
Mr. Mayor, may I follow you?
Go ahead, Remy.
Thank you. And I think it's an appropriate follow, because really what I'm going to say is just kind of an extension of what you're saying, which is that issues come to us in different ways. And so with those different ways, we have to be able to be responsive and reactive to them. And I think a lot of times the direction of the council is also taken into account in terms of what will appear on the agenda. And the mayor's example of Cahoots is perfect, of hearing about that repeatedly, hearing interest from the community, hearing interest in that project from the council, and then the mayor and the city manager to bring that work forward for a learning session. Another example I can think of a couple of years ago was when Zero Waste brought forward the plastic bag ban. And that was of interest to the council. And so then we similarly went through a learning period with that, and then implemented a bag ban, which ultimately was undone by a more relaxed state bag ban. But that was the process for that particular thing. And I think that we have to be adaptable to the many different ways in which things come to us. And I don't know if that's satisfactory for you, Councillor Chenoweth, but I do think that adaptation is important, especially because we have so many inputs from the community now so more than ever. I know we all receive not only emails, voicemails, text messages, somebody stops you on the street to talk about something. There's just so many ways in which we get input and become aware.
So let's recap, because we're still on the identify, and what I'm hearing we're kind of flipping between identify and discuss. And what I'm hearing is clarity of process across the council, get to respond to those issues that come up from different sources, including the councillor, citizens, and other ways. The part I'm not hearing in the discussion is the bigger picture focus. And I have heard this over the period of time when we were doing goal setting. If we're setting a direction, a policy direction and goals, there can be a danger of going in too many directions, right? So bringing it up is one thing. Councillor Chenoweth talked about that. Is there a concern about being able to say no, or not now, or not this year, but later? Is there a process for the council to determine that? Sounds like maybe Council President Dropkin was saying there are times that we have gone through a process that enabled the council to evaluate and then incorporate new ideas that weren't in the goals for the council, but that the council decided through a process that this was important enough to put resources towards. So is there a way to bring up those things? Is there a way to stay focused on the big policy decision that was made around goals, and also bring up things that come in from a different angle that were not on the goals, or that may not be a part of the goals, and to evaluate whether or not resources should be diverted to that work? So go ahead, especially if staff resources are required. Go ahead, Councillor. Thank you.
When I think of this process, I think of it in kind of a timeline. And I think, goal setting kind of sets the pace or the ideas for the year. And that pretty much tells the staff, this is what we are going to be talking about. These are our focus for that year. And so it's difficult once we get the ball rolling on the goals to insert other things. There's been a lot of meetings this year, and they're all important to do, but it does take time to educate the council on in certain areas, and just to get us all discussing it, which is another education process. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult when you've got another agenda over here and continue to bring things in along the timeline. You've got to figure, okay, I'm bringing these things into an already set timeline for this particular year because of the goals. But after that period of time, maybe then we can take up some of these topics, or if they're adjacent to some of our goals, seem to run in the same area, we can maybe discuss it at that particular time. But you kind of have to think of it, government doesn't seem to have that immediacy of, yes, we can do it right now. In fact, generally, it's probably not necessarily a good idea for them to be doing everything spontaneously right at the time. It takes some thought, it takes some education. So that's how I look at it. And I'm not sure everybody else feels that way, but it seems to flow better that way if I think about it that way.
Go ahead, Sal.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Kelly to a point. I think that there are certain sort of nuts and bolts that we develop through the planning process, and then things that just need to happen that relate to the basic functioning of the city. But of course, there needs to be space within those plans to be flexible as things come up that are very much relevant to the affairs and the businesses of the city. And I think we'd be, making a mistake if we just sort of said, well, we're going to defer all of these until we, catch up through our old, through our plans. So, one thing that we did, I think we only did it one meeting. I'm just going to suggest it, but the mayor might consider just adding a section to the city council agenda that is, maybe either as a part of the reports that we give, but basically just create an opportunity to entertain new business where people can bring something up, and then create some rules around that where, rather than just have it be an ad hoc thing, if you want to bring something up to the council, you should, provide something in written format to staff ahead of the meeting, that articulates, what the issue is, how it relates to the functioning of the city or the business of the city, kind of the way that the staff does, and use that as a way to bring something forward. Just a suggestion.
Yes, and you've used that very effectively, Sal, in the past. I have to commend you for that. I certainly have not been overwhelmed by all of your topics, but there's been some that have been very good, and I really appreciated you doing that. But I think it needs to be a more formalized process than you were kind of doing it ad hoc.
Mm-hmm.
I see another situation that we've had to jump on very quickly this year with the pandemic and all the things that's brought to the table. We've had to move a little more nimbly through a process, but the ARPA dollars came upon us very quickly, and we saw that it related to budget and finance, and then we worked with the finance director to see how we could incorporate, and now, as you know, the last month and a half has been totally kind of all of our work sessions have been focused around that, bringing our partners in. So I do see things that need to come to the table quicker than waiting for the goal setting piece, because we could not have waited for goal setting to get a discussion with ARPA on the table. But again, I'll come back and just reiterate that I do think we need to have a more discrete, planned approach. And I see Wendy's put some things down under solutions. There's a few things that Remy and I and Wendy have been talking about that are solution-based that we'll talk about a little later. But it comes up with something called 5 by 5 by 5, which is going to give some greater opportunity to communicate individually with each counselor.
Councillor Chenoweth, thank you. Scott, Councillor Chenoweth?
I again try to grab for my mouse. So sorry. I think the combination of what has just been said between the mayor and Councillor Menke and Councillor Peralta kind of sum up what I was trying to convey, which is there is no process. And a process, I don't care what that process looks like, just some sort of process where you know, where's the sandbox I'm to play in if I want something to occur? I need to know where that sandbox lies. And at this point, I genuinely do not know. I mean, to Sal's point, yes, I know I can call the mayor. I can call Jeff. I can email one of the staff members, which I've done. I mean, I've had people that were concerned, or I've reached out even to Mac Water and Light, Mr. Dietz, to try to get answers to stuff. You know, I know how to get an answer, but that's not the same as following a procedure that will make everybody happy, that will bubble to the surface issues that we all want to talk about. That's just shotgun firing. So.
Yeah, thank you. Chris, Remini?
Thank you. I hear what you're saying, Chris, and I understand the frustration with not having an exact process. And that's why I wanted to say there's all these different inputs that we receive, because that can then adapt, or we then have to adapt how we're going to bring those things up. And that's, and I think that
Might have lost her again.
Yeah, it looks like we've lost her again.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, so other thoughts and comments on that? We have, so one of the things that
Zach has his hand up.
Oh, Zach, go ahead.
It was my real hand, not my fake digital hand, so I got the mayor that time. I guess maybe oh, you're in the solutions. I guess I just don't know what the answer is. We're not
so
there
what happens,
yet. Okay.
You can still discuss. So what happens a lot of times, just so you know how this usually flows, is as the group starts to mature in the thinking around the topic, solutions will come up. So we'll bounce back and forth as we're discussing for a while until eventually you guys will all be at solution. So go ahead, discuss or solution. Either one, Zach. Oh,
and
Remy.
If I finish my thought really quick,
yeah,
and then
Remy's back.
Go for it.
Okay, and then apparently my internet connection, maybe along with many others, wants me to be quiet the rest of the night. So this will be my last 2 cents since I get disconnected when I try to speak. But that adaptability and what I was talking about, I think part of that is acknowledging that not everything that we want to be addressed by the council, we don't always have the leniency or the ability to do that. There's a lot of things that sometimes we want to bring, and finding the right pathway is important. And I hear what you're saying, that you would like to know what steps there are in the process specifically to get something on the agenda. And maybe you're not going to be satisfied with the fact that there are a lot of different pathways to get there. That has been the functionality, is that there are many pathways to bring things to the agenda, and sometimes you're not able to get things to the agenda. Sometimes the pathway is that you talk to the mayor or you talk to other councilors, or you get it so far, and then it doesn't fit within our strategic plan, or it doesn't fit within, as the mayor mentioned, staff time. But I'm definitely going to think about the frustration that is causing for you as you join the council, that there isn't a 3-step or 5-step process to getting something onto the agenda. And I do think that that's worth spending some time reflecting on. And then I'll just be a listener the rest of the night. Thank you. And I can't lower my hand for whatever reason. I've like 6 times. So I'm not raising my hand the rest of the night.
I'm going to keep calling on you, Remy. Remy, come on. Hey, Zach, do you want to say something? We're still discussing as well. You don't have to come up with a solution. Like I said, we're going to bounce back and forth for a little while. You got nothing right now. Okay, so while I see if others want to add, I'm going to recap a little bit. So a proposed add that we can try is a way to add to the session, to the regular schedule, an opportunity to present something that's outside along with a process for how the counselor prepares. So maybe asking questions that require some additional research first, how it relates to the business of the city, how it relates to the bigger picture goals and policy directions that you guys have already decided to set. The other question that I have for you is, how do you decide across the council when something, Remy mentioned, sometimes things just don't fit? So this body, the power of this body is in the body itself. So what is the process for deciding if something fits or not? Like if something's going to be a distraction from, the bigger picture things that you've talked about, or if it's like, as we mentioned before, with some of the things that we felt like we needed to respond to, COVID, those additional financial dollars, how does the body decide that? So if somebody brings something up, how is the body deciding whether or not you should divert resources from what you decided to do before to what you're deciding to do now? Council President Menke.
President, but thank you.
Sorry. Oh, that's right. Sorry.
I think that, well, for one thing, I have this concern that, we're a little loquacious bunch here, and, 5 people may want to present something in one evening. So I think if you want to do something like that and we want to put it somewhere in the meeting, possibly after the counselors speak about what's been going on during the week or something, maybe it would be good to have it be a sort of a timed event where you come with a written proposal and let the council look at it. And then at the next meeting, maybe vote up or down whether they think that this is something that's a timely topic, and no more than 2 presentations in one evening. And it should be timed pretty much, maybe 3 to 5 minutes maximum, because each meeting has its own character, its own agenda, and it's not really fair to everybody to have it totally blown out of the water with a whole bunch of ideas. I'm not opposed to any of them. I want to hear them, but I'm just saying, think in terms of time in council meetings and things like that. There should be a kind of an orderly and time-based process for presenting initially. And then depending on what happens, there might be a further work on it.
Great. Councillor Chenoweth, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I do have concerns about opening up new business in our meetings. I don't know. My experience already is our meetings tend to go pretty long. And I wasn't necessarily encouraging opening the door to extending our meetings beyond what they already are. But I do think there needs to be a process. If that process, and I'm not talking, I understand there are times where we're going to have issues that we deal with quickly, and I get that, and I get what Remy's saying. Totally understand that. There's things that don't come onto that level, but there are bigger issues that maybe we want to see come before the council at some point in time, and a formal or informal or just an expression, and if that already has existed and I just don't know it, just that would be helpful.
Wendy, let me share a couple of things, and this may be leaving discussion a little bit, but it's some thoughts. I just 2 weeks ago got back from a Oregon Mayor's Conference, and we had a breakout session that talked about this same topic of how do you get things in front of the council. And many cities referred to the council protocols. And I'm sitting here kind of shaking my head and scratching my head, and going into 17 years, we don't have protocols in McMinnville per se. I think that it's been unwritten how we do things. And so I came back and I talked to Amanda and I said, do we have protocols? And it's something that I just haven't turned the page, and it's on the back page of this. And she says, I asked the same question when I came and I couldn't find any. And so that's why we've reverted to Robert rules of conduct and protocols. And so what I've talked to Amanda, I've talked to Jeff, and I've gotten the go-ahead that Amanda is going to bring in maybe 5 protocols from communities that we feel are doing good jobs of council decorum and that type of thing, and take a look at that. We don't want to create protocols from this ground up, but let's take something that's been built and been working in other communities and seeing if we can gather information from those protocols. So I just wanted to share with the council that is a process that we are working towards right now, and it may take us a little while to get all of that and then get that out to the council to look at. And I hope it won't be an exercise that is as elongated as it was with our council working agreements, because that took a lot of time. That's one thing that I see. Number 2, I think a lot of things come up and they should be assigned to some of our committees if it falls within the realm of committees, because they can do the legwork and bring things back to us. So I want to make sure that we utilize our committees. And then something I've shared numerous times this evening is our work sessions. We're having so many more work sessions, and to me that's the learning and the knowledge and bringing the real foundational pieces to some of the discussions that some of us want to have, to be able to determine that when we go through the goal setting next year, does something elevate itself in a priority to replace something that's on the docket as it sits. And then Wendy, you might just share something that Remy and I as council leadership are going to be starting in September, is something called a 5x5x5, where Remy and myself are going to maybe go to lunch with each councilor on a quarterly basis. So we'll do 2 a month, and we're going to ask what's going well and what isn't going well. And then you can share with us your excitements and your roadblocks to success, and that's going to be another way. So again, I brought up a lot of things, but this has all come from these level 10s and having the kinds of discussions we're having right now.
Great. One question I have also is I feel like we're getting a little more clarity about what happens or how we can get it on the docket in a more controlled way to have a process identified. But let's talk a little bit about Chris's question about how do we get from here to deciding whether it should go on the docket or a different pathway, as Remy pointed out. So what does that look like? Who determines and how is it determined what path you take when something comes up that's not our regular business that just goes on the meeting agenda? Am I explaining clearly? So to get from, I have something I'm concerned about as a city councilor, say Councilor Chenoweth, because he was the one who brought it up. And how is it determined? What are the steps that are taken to determine what pathway you take? Is it just up to the councilor? Or what do you guys think? what are the appropriate steps to take to determine what pathway to take to address that concern? Kelly? Not council president, but Councilor Menke?
If it's a large topic or something, I don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of topics, but I think the committee idea is probably one of the better ones, bringing it to Scott and Jeff and Remy, maybe on a Monday meeting or something like that, just going and presenting your idea and seeing what they think. If there's a committee that would probably be receptive to researching that or to expanding on that. I think that might be a first step, because the committee idea is certainly a good one. And then depending on the other parts of it, I think the protocols are great, but I think just looking and seeing, number one, does it fit into committee work somewhere? Because we've got a lot of committees that do a lot of things.
Okay.
We've got Sal's hand up, and then we've got Remy's hand up.
Great. Okay, Sal?
Yeah, I just wanted to repeat, I suggest that people put their idea into a written format ahead of the meeting. And rather than narrowly sharing it with just leadership, maybe sharing it with leadership with some kind of expectation that it would be shared with the full council, like something written. You know, you could provide that at really any time between meetings. That would at least get people an opportunity to review it ahead of time and get a sense of whether there's support for the concept.
It still needs, though, to go through the mayor and the city manager, because you don't want to have that conversation between a bunch of counselors.
We can't send to the whole group anyway without violating public meetings law. So we have to send it to the small group with the expectation that it would get shared out to the broader council.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea, Sal.
Yeah, so using email to distribute a well-crafted presentation of the ideas to the council leadership first, and then to be distributed to the whole council before it even goes to the meeting.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify that I don't think it necessarily needs to be a fully fleshed out idea necessarily, but it needs to be fleshed out enough that you can put it in a written format and people can,
Perfect.
And Wendy, that one
Also,
from a standpoint of if it goes to the leadership, both Remy and I meet with Jeff on a weekly basis, so it would be timely. Remy has her hand up.
Could I just say one thing? I think if it goes to the leadership and the leadership puts it out, there should be some reference as to when this topic might come up. If you've got a really full agenda, it might not come up for 6 months to a year, depending on what the topic is.
But leadership can address that immediately to set the time.
Right, but I do think there should be some kind of time thing if it's going out to the rest of the council.
Okay.
Remy has her hand up.
Okay, Remy?
Thank you. I just want to say that I understand this feels like a problem right in this moment, but part of me thinks we're also trying to solve something that's not actually a problem, because there have been many whispering issues forward, and oftentimes, putting something into this formal structure. Now, let's say we onboard a new counselor right now. Now, we don't have a training methodology, so this new counselor also then wouldn't know this. And I don't want to limit the pathways for getting things in front of the council. I oftentimes, when things are brought to me from the community, I encourage people to prepare something that they might be able to do a 10 or 15-minute presentation to the council, and then I'll send an email that says, when could we fit this organization into the council agenda so that the council can hear it as a whole. And I am not trying to dismiss Councillor Chenoweth's observations or aggravation with the lack of a formalized process, but I do think the flexibility for the community is important. And sometimes things come to us as counselors that really aren't something that we're knowledgeable in, or that we have the ability to present or advocate to for council, but it seems logical, and we want the council to hear it and see if there's council interest. So I have some concern with trying to quickly move us into some sort of formalized structure, and that's it. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, I have 2 hands up.
Chris's is up.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, I want to convey, I hear the concern and understand the concern, and in no way, shape, or form am I suggesting that we put an end to any existing way in which issues are brought to us, or we encourage folks to bring those issues to the council as a whole. What I'm trying to advocate for is a process that goes alongside the myriad ways it already exists, that's more formal for us to bring ideas from ourselves, or that we're seeing that through a process that we all understand what's going on. There's some expectation on timeframes. There's some expectation that communication is going to take place, that we want this topic to be covered. We don't have anything to do that. So this is not something that is, if we do this, we get rid of all the other ways in which things are happening. This is, we need a way that will ensure that those who have such an, want to get something forward can do so.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It does.
For sure. And, did somebody else have their hand up?
I didn't see anything, Wendy, as I go through.
Okay. So one thing I will just wanted to throw in there with regards to what Remy was saying. The other thing about coming up with a process is Remy brought up a way that she, one of the ways that you guys had identified wanting to include is how to effectively bring forward citizen concerns. Remy brought up what she has found effective for her. So when you create a process, we talked about this a little bit before, it feels like it might be limiting, but what it does is it enables you to collect data. So if you're consistently doing something and you notice that you consistently have sticking points, then you can change. You can, because you have good data, because you've consistently been following something. So we could capture in the documenting of this some recommended pathways that have been successful for getting citizens, opening up possibilities for citizens to bring things to the council as well. Like, for example, what Remy just said. Go ahead, Remy. Since I'm using your example, I think it would be great for you to jump in here.
Well, the other thing is we used to just have on the agenda an item that said new business, and it didn't need to be anything more it was nothing more formal than that. It was just an opportunity at the end of the meeting to say, so-and-so has contacted me and is interested in this, etc. And it just delivers the information to the council succinctly, and then next steps can be taken. The other thing would be just having one other concept would be just having a simple call for agenda items, or an open invitation for agenda items that we can then discuss in the weekly meeting.
Okay. And by you say weekly, it will be leadership, you, Scott, and Jeff, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Region before council and send to leadership, and then regular call for agenda items to be discussed in leadership Weekly meetings. Great. Okay. So I'm going to recap some of the ideas we have around solutions. So I did capture, I think, since citizen comments were included in the original issue, I captured Remy's, what she has found has worked well, that maybe we document a way to best practice or a pathway that you can encourage citizen participation when they have something they'd like the whole council to hear, that the citizens create a 10-minute presentation that they might share with you that you send to leadership. Did I capture that correctly, Remy? I didn't type it when you said it.
Sorry, that was choppy. I couldn't hear you.
That's okay. So I was trying to capture your the method that you found some success in when a citizen comes to you with a concern they want the whole council to hear, that you have found it to be an effective way to encourage them to create a 10-minute presentation, and then you would send it to council leadership to maybe get on the agenda to present that 10-minute presentation. So that might be something.
Yeah, I have done that numerous times over the last number of years, especially when I get approached on the street with somebody that's passionate about something and really wants a response. I say, please email me and the concept of what you'd like to present to council, and then I forward that email to or respond and loop in the mayor and the city manager and say, is it feasible to bring this before council? And it's not always immediately accessible, but there's never been a time when those presenters haven't been made time for.
Great. Awesome. Okay. And then a second solution that we came up with that was from Remy as well was the regular call for agenda items to be discussed in leadership teams' weekly meetings. What is that called?
I think that's out there. I think that I hope that everybody knows that there is an open invitation for any feedback. I mean, I feel as though the mayor and I and the city manager all respond when an individual counselor has something they want to discuss. But I guess just stating it very clearly and opening that door. I don't feel like we need to have, I said a call out, but I think that actually adds staff work, right? Then Claudia has to put out an email. Are there any counselors but I maybe just figuring out a way to make sure that everybody understands that there is an open door policy because council leadership does want to be responsive as well.
Okay. Open invitation weekly. Or what if we just have it as a practice that counselors put on their calendar when they should email, if like a repeating thing, if you have email leadership with any agenda items, and then it's on their calendars for any agenda items to be discussed in leadership team's weekly meetings. So, okay, so does that more clearly capture it? Open invitation for counselors to add any agenda items, to send agenda items to be discussed in leadership team's weekly meetings. Okay, great. So the next, go ahead.
Her thumb was up, so that's great.
Perfect. Okay, the next one was added by Sal. He suggested that people put their ideas into a written format before the meeting and then share it with the council leadership with an expectation that after being processed by council leadership, it would be shared before the meeting with the whole council. So the leadership sees it first and then distributes it to the council. And then and Kelly added make sure there's a reference to when the topic might come up. So time coupled in the information sent out to the council. Sal and Kelly, do you feel like that, it could be more eloquently put probably, but do you feel like that captures the essence of the solution you were putting on the table?
Sal says yes.
Great. Okay, and then for the fourth one, add a session to the city council schedule to create an opportunity to present something. This was from you, Kelly. I think Kelly or Chris, one of you guys brought this up. I think.
What is it?
Add a session to the city council schedule to create an opportunity to present something. I think that was your.
Well, it's kind of added. It's kind of similar to what Remy brought up. It's just, you know, create a process, state what the issue, how it relates to the business. I think it's very similar to what Remy brought up.
Yeah, it might fit also underneath Sal's idea.
Yeah, that
to
too.
Something written, and then
yeah, the written part is important.
And then that carries through to being added to the agenda after that step is taken. So I'm going to take this off. And then this also was, we might want to talk about if this is added to something after the counselors speak about what is going on. Maybe you come up with a written proposal that probably is captured in this as well. Written and then onto the, okay. So this came from Scott, create and adopt the McMinnville City Council protocol. I did have one question about that, Scott. Does the council protocol identify ones that you saw, identify methods for bringing these topics before the council?
We just talked generally about it, and so that's why we've asked to get copies, maybe 5 copies to look and see how good those protocols are. We don't want to add to disruption. We want to make it easier, and so I think this is a process that's in the works, and we'll review it at a leadership level, and Amanda will help us do that and then bring it back to council to see if it makes sense for us. We don't want to add things that are just from an adding standpoint.
Yes, to city council review until adoption. Okay, so we'll keep that on. Create and bring McMinnville City Council protocol options to City Council for review and potential adoption. Options. Okay, and then Scott, how about, so can you flesh out this idea a little bit more? How is it determined? Is that at the leadership team level that they determine if the issue that's presented in Sal's way should go first to an assigned committee? How's that decision made?
I think we need to give credit to our committees to, if items come to the council that haven't been completely fleshed out, but at the same token, we want further development of that. If it fits within a committee, we ought to throw it that direction. A good example is going to be tonight with the Economic Vitality group coming to us with 2 proposals that could utilize ARPA dollars. And we turned it over to them, and they've flushed it out. They've done a great job, and we'll have presentations tonight that are much more inclusive and specific than we could have ever done at the council level, given all the things that are on our plate.
Okay, so
can I ask a follow-up to that one?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Maybe this is way too process nerdy, but on number 5,
oh, okay.
about recommending, was that 5 or the one that we were just, Mayor was just talking about recommending things
Yes, right here.
to our committees. I like that. How does this group come to the agreement on if it goes or not? Is it just if one person thinks it's a good idea, it goes? I mean, there's things that fit in the bucket, but there's also things that don't necessarily totally fit in the bucket. I could think of, the list of projects and how we should spend that ARPA money. I think Remy and I shared the feeling that should get reviewed and input by the DEI committee, and we both shared that, but I don't know if it's going to happen or if not. And so do we need to put those things to a vote? Does someone need to make a motion in a second, then it goes to a vote? I mean, if we're going to use Robert's rules, that would be it, right? So that one makes sense, but that doesn't always happen on things that I think it should.
Okay. So what you're asking about, Zach, and Scott, maybe you can answer this, but what you're asking about is after it comes to the city council during discussion, if some of the city councilors say, I think it should go to one of the committees, how is that determined? Not before it comes to city council, because I think you were referring, Scott, to it going to the committees before it even goes before the city council, right?
Correct. I think the legwork can be done at committee, but we've got like a DEI committee that is different in nature, and making sure that we are inclusive and there's equity in this whole process. I'll refer to Council President Drapkin, and I don't know if Kylie's on, but they're working as a committee, going to be making suggestions of what they would like to see prior to make us voting on certain things, to make sure there's diversity, equity, and inclusion in the approach we take. So I think there's two different things we're talking about, maybe, Zach.
But can we answer Zach's question? Because there are two times that it could go to the committees. One is like you were talking about before, but right. Then if it goes to the city council and part of the discussion is a couple of city councilors say, I think this should go to back to a committee to be further developed, it should be able to go that way as well. How is that determined? Is it voted on at that point, or what? How does it sent back to a committee? Council President Drapkin.
Thank you. And I'm going to again say that there's so many pathways here. This is really difficult to say that it has to be step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because of how these things play out. I will use Councilor Geary's example, and I will say after that meeting, we both expressed that interest in ARPA funds being reviewed by DEI-AC. The pathway that I chose was to then contact the chair of that committee, and before that to also communicate with our city manager and make sure, because sometimes in meetings and public meetings when we're speaking, sometimes things can be misconstrued. So I wanted to clarify to the city manager that I understood the process, and I understood that it would be council that would be making the decision about the ARPA funds, not the DEI-AC, but that I felt that there might be valuable input there. So then I contacted the chair of the DEI-AC and said, I want to make you aware that these funds are going to be flowing through council, and there are multiple councilors who see a benefit to DEI-AC reviewing these. And it's a little unique in this situation because, of course, the action plan of the DEI-AC is still under construction. But that then, in that specific example, that was the pathway. And then that chair contacted our finance director and created some action items around that. So I apologize if this is seeming as though I'm kind of skirting around a specific answer to many of these questions. I just really see that there are so many ways in which some of these things happen, and I'm scared that we're trying to nail down something so specifically that we can't, because every situation is so nuanced. But perhaps
I agree.
That's also because the internet is unstable.
I agree, and I think one of the problems I'm having is I think we're just playing whack-a-mole with how do we make a process to solve all our problems, and the most solution is usually the most elegant, right? The Occam's razor here is you want to bring something up, ask whoever the mayor and council president and city manager are, and just try your best to get it on the agenda. I like all these ideas for getting things on about writing something up if that's the way you're comfortable, but if you want to talk through things, there's different ways. So I think I somewhat agree.
Thank you, Zach. Wendy, I'll just let you know that we've got 5 minutes left if we want to do the meeting recap, or if you feel it's better to.
Sure. Yeah. So we reviewed. I think what I would propose is that we reviewed some suggested things to try, with the caveat that we are not ruling out alternate pathways. If we put some of these disciplines in place, again, the goal would be to try them out and see how they're working for us, and then you can change the process once you have a discipline in place. And the key is to be learning as you're implementing, so that you can get better and better at it. So, not that this is going to capture every pathway, but it hopefully will move us forward on the issue that was brought to us at the beginning. The one thing that we need to do before we do meeting ratings is identify next steps. So what I'm going to suggest is that perhaps we can have Mayor, maybe we should have the advisory team try to put this together in some kind of a proposed process that we can then bring back to the city council, and then start implementing with action items for specific individuals. Leadership, the council leadership team will have a rollout role, of course, because a lot of the review will be through them. Would that be an appropriate next step for this? We'll take this back to the EOS advisory team.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm going to create an action item for the advisory team to package this in a way that moves it forward. Any other discussions before we go to meeting ratings? Okay, hearing none. Scott, it's on a 1 to 10 scale.
9.
Okay. Kelly?
Give it an 8.5.
Okay, 8.5. Okay, Remy.
I'm going to give this probably a 7.5. I felt like we had great participation. I also know that we didn't, I don't believe we got to resolutions that were maybe making everybody feel satisfied. I don't know if we have to do that in every meeting, but I would say that we had, that people spoke openly and honestly, and I appreciate that.
Great. Zach.
7.
Okay. Anything under an 8, and you give us feedback on what could have been better for you, or what you see that we could improve on.
Yeah, I think it just felt like we were going on and on, around and around, just to fill the time at the end there.
Okay. Hey, Chris.
I think I'd go probably a 7.5.
Okay.
For similar reasons to what was voiced by Remy,
Okay.
Councilor Drapkin, sorry. I feel like I actually am more unsettled, particularly by the last 10 minutes of conversation, than I was when this all started. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Sal?
I'll give it a 7. I think that I think this is a problem that's pretty easily addressed, and I feel like maybe somewhat similar to Zach that or maybe to Remy, that we're making it a little harder than we need to.
Okay. Great. Okay. Back to you, Mr. Mayor. There's 1 minute left for wrap up.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wendy, and thanks everyone for their diligence in doing the homework and the discussion this evening. It is now